Welcome back, everybody, to AFL Advance, the week number 6 edition. This is Josh, and I am flying solo tonight. It was just a weird night. I'm recording this on Thursday, NFL opening day in the real NFL, and schedule-wise, it just didn't work out for me to have a co-host tonight. Magic's playing his game right now against Danny for week 5. Stokes has other things going on. I think he's playing a game in another league. RVD has other commitments going on this evening, so you just have me for this week. So I'm going to dive into these matchups a little more in depth, give you my opinion, give you some analysis on some high-level issues going on with all these teams. But before we get into it, let's just talk about where we're at in the season, because we're turning the page now to week 6. And by the time you get to week 6, you have bye weeks are starting to take into effect. We had a few teams off last week, a few teams off the week before, so that's a factor. But you're also getting over the hump of the newness of the season. No more is it, well, it's early, or, we lost that game, but there's a long way to go. You're in the heart of the season now. You're in the middle of the second quarter of the season. And this, to me, is where the good teams start to get their winning streaks and build momentum toward their playoff chases. And the teams that started strong early, that are going to end up being pretenders, start to show their true colors. So I talked about this in week 2, where that's my favorite week of the season, where you lose week 1. Are you going to become 0-2, or are you going to save your season? This time of year too, week 6, week 7, week 8, to me is where you really see the cream rise to the top. Now, obviously, we're not even in the second half of the season yet, so there's still a lot of things that can happen. You can have big-time injuries that alter the course of a team. You can have guys just struggling and losing 3 or 4 in a row that obviously will hurt your chances of making the playoffs. But we're at a point now in the season where it's no longer a small sample size. If you have a losing record after week 6, it's no longer, well, it's early. That's a large enough sample size that you're struggling this season, and it's time to turn it around. And as we look at this schedule of games coming up for week 6, there are a handful of teams that had playoff aspirations this year that absolutely have to find a way to get into the win column this week. One of those teams is hosting Thursday night football against the Philadelphia Eagles. That's the Carolina Panthers and Rod. Now, last time we saw Rod on the field was week 4, and his Panthers had a huge win over Hitman's Patriots. Rod started the season 0-2 and then ripped off wins against the Saints and the Patriots to pull back to 2-2. He then had his bye week, and now he comes off the bye and has a very winnable game against the 0-5 Eagles and Emo. The Eagles are playing without Carson Wentz, who's injured. They're going to be starting Nick Foles. They're playing without Zach Ertz, and they're just not playing good ball right now. They're winless through the first 5 games. The Panthers have to win this game at home. You cannot afford a hiccup at 2-2 at this point in the season, with the Falcons having a good record. JD still struggling. JT is struggling. The NFC South is there for the taking, and the Panthers can absolutely not afford a hiccup in this situation. They are going to be going without Thomas Davis. I don't think it's going to matter much. I expect the Panthers at home on Thursday Night Football under the lights to get a big win over the Eagles and Emo this week. A game I'm really looking forward to is on the Sunday 1 o'clock slate as Costa's Falcons host Prime's Dolphins. Now, these are 2 teams that are coming off of really bad losses. For Costa, it was kind of a prove-it game against Nino. Got down big early, made it close late, but the Bills ended up pulling away and got a big win. He had a bye week in week 5, so he's been sitting with that one for a handful of days, and now he takes the field trying to get that taste out of his mouth. For Prime's Dolphins, they're sitting at 3-2. They lost their first game of the season, went on a 3-game winning streak, and then got absolutely manhandled last week at home against MVP's Titans. It was a demoralizing loss for Prime. He put half his team on the trade block after the game happened. For Costa, his Falcons are 2-2. They win one, lose one, win one, lose one. Costa has to find some consistency. We talked about this with Rod and the Panthers in the previous game. Nobody in the NFC South has really staked their claim to running away with that division just yet. So it's there for everybody, even the guys that have losing records at this point. But I think at this point in the season, you're going to see somebody take off in that division race. I expect Rod to beat the Eagles. Costa has to hold serve this week and beat Prime at home. The problem is, I don't think he's going to. Prime's been playing very good ball. He lost really badly to MVP last week. I think a lot of people are going to lose to MVP in this league, and MVP is going to make a lot of people look bad. I think that was more of a blip on the radar screen. I think that Prime's Dolphins find a way to go to Atlanta this week and win a hard-fought, close game against the Falcons and get a big win to pull themselves to 4-2, and that would actually knock the Falcons down to 2-3, which is quite surprising because Costa seems like he's been playing pretty good ball. In Baltimore, you have Frank's 2-3 Baltimore Ravens hosting my Chicago Bears. Now, my Bears are still playing without Mitch Trubisky. AJ McCarron is at the helm. We had a big win last week in Trubisky's first game on the bench, McCarron's first start. We beat the Vikings 44-3, or I'm sorry, not 43, 44. I want to get the score right, so let's just go back and look. I know it was lopsided. 44, where are we at here? 45-7. So, but it wasn't a lot of McCarron. It was all Keith Marshall. Keith Marshall had over 250 yards rushing, and that's one of the reasons why I felt comfortable sending Jordan Howard away, was because in the last 3 games since Keith Marshall took over the starting job, he has 100-yard rushing days in all 3 games. He has multiple touchdowns in all 3 games. He has 8 touchdowns on the year, and then last week he broke the 200-yard mark. He is the engine right now that makes my offense go, especially with a backup quarterback in McCarron who has decent accuracy at the short and intermediate lengths, but only has 86 throw power and doesn't have the best deep accuracy to take advantage of guys like Tyreek Hill and DeAndre Hopkins downfield. So for me to win this game, I got to continue to be smart. I got to continue to play ball control offense. I can't do the Trubisky offense where I'm lobbing it downfield. And honestly, I think the Trubisky injury, as weird as this sounds, came at a good time for me. I was getting into bad habits in this game, trying to force the ball downfield, force it into coverage, throwing interceptions, and that's not my game. That's not what's made me successful at Madden in my entire life of playing this game. I'm a ball control guy. I'm a runner. I need to run the ball, play good sound defense, and then pick my spots to take shots in the passing game, and I'm hoping that having a guy like McCarron in there that you just can't air it out with is kind of getting me back on course and getting my game back steady to where it needs to be, stabilizing it, and then when Trubisky comes back, I can hit the ground running with a much more talented quarterback, but still stick to that game plan. I don't predict my own games on this show, but this is a game I absolutely have to win, even with a backup quarterback in tow, and we have a little bit of revenge on our mind this game, because at one point a couple days ago, it looked like we were going to get Joe Flacco from the Ravens. Frank backed out at the last second, so it kind of put us behind the 8 ball, forced us to go with McCarron. And for the Ravens, 2-3, had a head-scratching loss to Flip's Steelers a couple weeks back, so they got to find a way to win a game here just to pull to 500. And because right now they're chasing the Browns, who are 4-1, and the Ravens just can't afford to get their 4th loss here. So we'll see what happens in that game. In Houston, Stokes' Houston Texans are on an absolute roll right now. They have 2 huge blowout victories the last 2 weeks against the Chiefs and the Titans respectively, but they're doing it with Tom Savage, as Deshaun Watson is going to miss a month and a half with a broken collarbone. It is now the Tom Savage show in Houston, but it's not the Tom Savage show. It is 100% the Corey Grant show. He ran all over MVP's defense. He did the same thing to Sham's defense last week, and unfortunately for Kerry Burr, he's having a hell of a season, 4-1. He got the trade with Jordan Howard. Jordan Howard had a monstrous first game in his debut for the Browns in Week 5 and a victory over the Jets. I don't think it's going to go well for the Browns this week. Stokes is on a roll. He's going to be rocking the All Reds in Houston. I think they're going to be very unwelcoming hosts for the visiting Browns, and I think the Texans are going to win, and probably win big. 2 of my division rivals are going to be facing off this week in Minnesota, as the 2-3 Vikings take on the 4-1 Packers. Now, both of these teams had pretty devastating losses last week. The Vikings had a chance to pull into sole possession of 2nd place last week, because we both were 2-2 on Monday Night Football. They lost to my Bears, so they dropped to 2-3. Conversely, Fisher was undefeated, 4-0, and they lose kind of a head-scratching game to Roman's Dallas Cowboys. Roman blew out the Packers last week, so now the Packers, they started off 4-1, or 4-0. They lose their first game, and this is what I was talking about at the top of the show. A contender will get a loss, rebound, and find a way to start stacking up wins again. A pretender gets a loss, and that loss discourages them. It becomes 2 losses, 3 losses, 4 losses. All of a sudden you look up, you're looking at the standings, and all that momentum you had early in the season is completely gone. This to me is a crossroads game for Fisher. I know he's 4-1. I know it's only week 6. I get all of that. But what he can't do here is have a let-up game against Mustangs Vikings. The thing about the Vikings is they're not nearly as bad as that 45-7 loss they had against my Bears last week. They had some very ill-advised passes, put them behind the 8 ball. I think Mustang's going to get back to what's working for him, which is the running game with the dual threat of Delvin Cook and Latavius Murray. I am going to predict the Vikings get an upset victory here. I think Sting's going to find a way to take the air out of the ball, run the ball, play solid defense. I think Fisher's going to force some interceptions. I just have a feeling about a Vikings upset here, so we'll see if that comes true. Let's talk about the New Orleans Saints. The 1-3 Saints and JT welcoming in KK the Destroyer's Detroit Lions, who are sitting at 2-2. For the Saints, it's been a weird season. They had the big comeback victory week 1 against Mustangs Vikings and have since dropped 3 in a row before having their bye week last week. For KK, it's been win-lose, win-lose. So he's a guy that needs to find some consistency. He's another guy that, if the Packers do fall this week, has a chance to be right there in the thick of things in the NFC North. I think he is still playing with a roster that's deficient, but he's a good player. I think he's finding ways to overcome that. He seems like he's a smart player, and I think he's going to be a guy that's going to get more wins as he gets more comfortable with his team. He's 2-2 now. What I've seen from Justin is he's got a good passing game, but he's been susceptible to making 1 or 2 head-scratching throws during a game. It's almost like he presses the button to throw to the receiver, and before it's even intercepted, he's like, oh shit, because he does the game with his headphones and you can hear what he's saying, which is super entertaining. But he's got to get over the hump there. And as much as I'd like to see him do that, I'm going to say the Lions go to the Superdome this week and get a win over the Saints. KK's playing well. He's a good player. I think he has really sound defense, and he's got the kind of defensive skills that if Justin is going to have careless mistakes, the Lions are going to take advantage. So I think for the Lions, they're going to find a way to go to New Orleans and sneak out a very close, hard-fought victory, which will get the Lions a winning record at 3-2 and will be very devastating for the Saints. That would bury them to 1-4. The Saints have to find a way to get a win this week and get to 2-3. In New York, Swags Jets. They are having a rough go of it. They're 1-4, but they welcome in a division rival who's also struggling mightily, the 1-3 New England Patriots and Hitman. Now, Hitman hasn't played his Week 5 game yet. He still has to play JD and the Bucs, so we'll see what happens there. But for now, you have a guy that has an AFL Super Bowl championship on his resume that's 1-3 and really struggling to find consistency. Now, he lost a tough game against Stokes. That can happen. Week 1 was a blowout loss to Shams Chiefs. That was kind of a head scratcher. Week 2, he takes care of business and beats Justin's Saints, and then he had that loss against Rodney we talked about where they kind of got into it after the game. I expect Hitman to turn it around this week and go to New York and get a win over Swag's Jets. Swag to me is getting better, but the results are just not showing up on the scoreboard as far as the final score goes. The games are close, but he's either finding a way to lose games late or his opponents are finding a way to win games late. And let's not hide from the fact that in this game you're going to have one of the best rosters in AFL against one of the worst rosters in AFL. And in this particular version of Madden, talent is going to find a way to win more often than not. I think the Patriots go to New York and get a victory. I think Hitman gets some momentum going. If he can find a way to beat JD in Week 5 and then win this game, he's going to pull even to 500, and then he can take off on the second half of the season. We talked about it earlier in the show. Position yourself now for a second half run to the playoffs. For the Jets, if they lose this game, they're 1-5, and you hate to say it this early in the season, but 1-5 to me would be sayonara, season over. I know Swag's not going to quit fighting. I'd like to see, for his sake, Swag get a win this week, but it's a tough battle this week, and both of these teams, neither one can really afford another loss, so in a weird way, it's kind of a playoff atmosphere in New York. This is going to be a very exciting game in Washington as Bailey and the Skins take on Danny's San Francisco 49ers. Neither one of these guys have lost a game yet. The 49ers are 4-0. They're currently underway with Magic's Colts for Week 5. Bailey was off Week 5, so his Redskins are 4-0. This, to me, is going to be must-see TV. Bailey has been smashing people. The problem for Bailey is his schedule hasn't been super difficult. He had the forced win against Joker, I should say. He had a game against Emo. He had a game against Bo. And then he had a game against Sham, who was undefeated at the time. But Sham really threw himself out of that game, and Bailey's Redskins blew out the Chiefs in Arrowhead. To me, this is a measuring stick game for both of these guys. Danny's had a little bit tougher road to hoe. He has beaten Joker. He's beaten Reese. Danny's had some solid wins. He's beaten T-Mac, so he's gone through his division and beaten all of his division rivals once. That's huge. Now he's going to go on and take on somebody that I think, if Danny has Super Bowl aspirations, is going to be in his way in the playoffs, and the Redskins. Bailey's a guy that two of us predicted to win the NFC East and the NFC on the preview show for Season 1. I want to say I want to pick Bailey in this game because of rosters, but I feel like Danny just has such a strong feel for this game. The way I see him run his offense, the reads he's making, the way he adjusts on defense. As much as I want to pick Bailey and that roster he's built up in Washington, I'm going to say the Niners go to Washington and get a huge statement victory over the Redskins. I don't have a lot of convention in that pick, but I'm just looking forward to that game, and I can't wait to see what happens. Reese's Arizona Cardinals are 3-2 after absolutely smashing Emo last week. Now, Reese needed that win in the worst way because he had lost back-to-back games after starting the season 2-0 and fallen to 500. So his Cardinals get back on track last week with a huge win in Philadelphia. They return home to the desert this week to welcome in the struggling Tampa Bay Bucks and JD. They are 1-3 right now. They still have to play the Patriots in Week 5, but JD is just really struggling to find consistency. Defensively, he's giving up more big plays than he's ever been used to in the past. Offensively, he's throwing more interceptions than he's been used to. He's not having any kind of success in the running game. Really, it's a three-phase problem right now in Tampa Bay. I give JD credit as a guy that I think will find a way to figure it out, but this is a tough ask to go to Arizona against that defense, against a guy in Reese who I think is playing at a high level right now, and to figure it out on the fly there. I think the Cardinals get a win, and unfortunately for JD and the Bucks, I think they continue to struggle. So I predict that the Cardinals will be 4-2 after this game in the desert. Donald Livingston's Jacksonville Jaguars are sitting at 2-2, and they welcome in Joker's LA Rams, who are 1-3. Now, neither of these guys have played their Week 5 game yet, so we don't know what's going to happen there. Donald got smashed in a season opener against Stokes, and then he also lost a game to MVP, but he has since gone on to win 2 games in a row. And then Week 5, he plays Flip Steelers. That is a very winnable game for Donald, and a game that he has to win if he's going to keep pace in the AFC South. We know that Stokes and MVP are going to be the pace setters of that division. For Donald and for Magic, you have to win the games that don't come against those guys, because you have 4 games against some of the top competition in AFL every season. You hope beyond hope you can split those, or at least steal one of them, and then you have to win the games along the way if you're going to have a chance at making the playoffs. Donald has done that so far. He has another chance this week, but the task is not easy. Joker, last time we saw him on the field was against Roman's Cowboys, and he absolutely smashed Roman's Cowboys. So Joker was winless up at that point, got his first win. I think Joker goes to Jacksonville this week and gets his second win of the season, and the Rams will pull to 2-3. Sham's Kansas City Chiefs. They started off 3-0 and were the talk of AFL, and since then, blowout losses to the Redskins, blowout losses to the Texans, giving up north of 40 points in both games, scoring less than 10 points in both games, making terrible reads, terrible mistakes, getting away from the running game. The good news for Sham is coming to Arrowhead this week is the 1-3 Steelers and Flip. No disrespect to Flip, but he's really been struggling this year. 1-3. He did manage to get his first win of the season against Frank last time he was on the field. He has yet to play his Week 5 game. The Frank game and the Ravens came in Week 4, so we don't know what's going to happen with the Steelers and the Jaguars in Week 5. But for Sham, this is a game he has to win. There is no excuse. There is no tomorrow. We talked about this earlier. You started off great. 3 wins. Everything is going great. You lose a bad game to Bailey. That can happen. You get smashed. You move on. You play Stokes. That's a terrible matchup for almost anybody in AFL. You lose again. You get smashed. Okay. You've lost 2 in a row. What you can't have happen is you hang your head and you go out and lose a game to a very winnable opponent at this point, the way that Flip's been playing this year, and then you pull even to 500 and all of a sudden the 3 wins you piled up early in the season are basically out the window. Sham has to find a way to find some consistency, get that back in his game, get back to the running game, lean on Derrick Henry, who he traded for a couple days ago, and get himself to a win. I'm going to say Sham finds a way to get it done. I'm losing confidence in this pick just from what I've seen from Sham's games recently, but I think the Chiefs find a way to get back on track. Sham gets a win, gets to 4-2, takes a deep breath, and prepares himself for a second half run in what I think is shaping up to be a very winnable AFC West for Sham and the Kansas City Chiefs. Speaking of that AFC West, 2 teams that desperately need to find a way to get a win and find a way to get consistency are Bo's Oakland Raiders and RVD's Los Angeles Chargers. The Chargers only win. They're 1-4, came against Emo's Eagles, who are winless, and the Raiders are 0-5 on the season and have barely been competitive in any of their losses. The Chargers, on the other hand, have been blown out in several games, including last week against the Giants. So now these guys are going to be squaring off in what I think is a loser goes home situation. Now, the good thing about these teams is they're in the AFC West. Nobody's running away with this division. The Broncos are 3-1. Sham is 3-2. But there's still plenty of games left against those teams, and I think there's going to be losses left on both of those teams' schedules that whoever wins this game between the Chargers and the Raiders has a chance to crawl back into this race. More so the Chargers because of the fact they're 1-4. I think 5 losses in your first 5 games for the Raiders. That's going to be super tough to overcome unless Bo just goes on a tremendous run here. I'm looking at RVD here as a guy, get himself a win on the road, in the division, in the conference, just to get the tiebreaker scenario set up. You know, you get it's a perfect game that's going to count in tiebreakers down the stretch. Division, conference, everything. You get a win, you take a deep breath, you're 3-2, you look up at the standings, the guys that you're chasing are not that far away, and you find a way to go on a run. So I think RVD's Chargers go to Oakland this week, get a victory. I don't know if it'll be pretty, I think it might be kind of ugly, but a win is a win at this point. There's no style points. I think the Chargers pull to 2-4, and unfortunately for Bo, the Raiders fall to a very disappointing 0-6. Win or lose, both RVD and Bo will be watching this next game on Sunday Night Football under the lights in Mile High as A-Bomb's Denver Broncos 3-1 welcome in E-Dub's New York Giants. They are 4-1. Now, A-Bomb has only lost 1 game this season at the hands of Nino. The other 3 games he's played, he's won. This is another tough task this week. E-Dub has been up and down. It seemed like anyway. He had that tough game against Roman week 1 that he squeaked out, and then he loses to KK the Destroyer's Lions on Monday Night Football in New York week 2, and he has since ripped off 2 wins in a row against JD's Bucks and RVD's Chargers, and now he has another road game against A-Bomb's Broncos. E-Dub needs to win this game. Now, I know A-Bomb's been playing well. He's only lost 1 game against Nino. To me, this is one of the headline games of the week. I'm excited that it's on Sunday Night Football under the lights because it deserves to be in that primetime slot. And if A-Bomb wins this game, let's think about that for a second. If A-Bomb were to win this game and pull to 4-1, and he could look at his schedule and say, my only loss came against the guy who has the most Super Bowl championships in AFL, all of a sudden, A-Bomb becomes a guy that you have to make the favorite to win the AFC West, and as a guy that you have to look around the AFC and say, this guy is a contender and someone to be reckoned with, because if he knocks off E-Dub, he's knocking off a multiple-time AFL Super Bowl champion and a consistent playoff threat. For E-Dub, he has no room to spare here, because as well as he's playing at 4-1, Bailey is 5-0. Or, excuse me, Bailey's 4-0. He had a bye week mixed in there. They haven't played yet, the Giants and the Redskins, but E-Dub needs to keep pace so those Giants-Redskins games have a chance to decide the winner. You can't fall 2 or 3 games back, because then even if you win both of those games against the Redskins, you're still not going to win the division. So I think there's going to be a little bit more desperation on E-Dub's side, and A-Bomb, I think, is going to find a way to keep this game close. But in the end, I'm going to say the Giants win this game. But I'm really much looking forward to this one. A division rivalry matchup is taking place in Tennessee as the 4-1 Titans and MVP play host to Magic's 1-3 Colts. Now, we all know what happened with the Colts earlier this season. They win Week 1 in a shocking upset over Joker's Rams. Week 2, they take the forced loss to Reese's Cardinals because Magic just didn't have any availability. And then they lost back-to-back heartbreakers. They lost to the Browns at home. Philip Dorsett had a chance to bring the ball in for a game-winning score at the end, didn't score, and then also got injured. He's going to be back for this game, and that is big because he gives them a vertical threat, somebody to take the top off the defense, open the underneath routes for guys like Ladarius Green, guys like Kamar Aiken, guys like Dante Moncrief, and open up the running game also so Magic has a chance to be balanced on offense. And then on the other side, MVP is a bully. You know how it goes, and I don't mean that as an insult. I mean he has a way of getting you down and not letting you get back up, and if you give him an inch, he's going to take a mile, and if you make a mistake, he's going to make you pay for it. We saw it happen against Prime. We saw it happen against Bo. MVP lost 2 weeks ago to Stokes. This is his only loss on the season. Unfortunately for my guy Magic, I just can't pick against the Titans at this point in time. I think Magic has a puncher's chance to keep this game close, but MVP is playing on another level right now. He did lose that game to Stokes. I think it made him a little more self-aware of what he needs to do to get his Titans right for a playoff run in the AFC, the way it's set up with guys like Stokes and Nino. So I think that's at least interesting that he's looking at his roster and thinking of new ways to shape it. But for this particular game, I think the Titans run all over the Colts. I think Mariota is going to have a chance to put up a lot of big stats, and I wish Magic the best. I think he's going to need a lot of luck, but I'm picking the Titans to win this game. My 2 games I'm looking forward to the most this week, since I'm the only one on here, I'm going to pick 2. The first one that I'm looking forward to, and I just had it, it is 49ers against Bailey's Washington, because to me, let's find out who the big dog is in the NFC. We talked about how before the season started, the AFC had Stokes, Nino, and MVP. What the NFC had was more depth of guys that had proven track records and guys who had been to Super Bowls and won Super Bowls. Bailey was in that conversation. Danny's never been to an AFL Super Bowl, but I think he's respected on the level of guys that have gotten to Super Bowls and won Super Bowls. He's on that level consistently. I think people think of him like that. So in this particular matchup, coming to a head week 6, both teams undefeated, I'm super excited to see what happens in this game. I predicted Danny to win it, but I think this is going to be a power struggle game. If the Redskins win, all of a sudden they're the team that everybody's going to be looking at in the NFC as that's the team you got to knock off. If the 49ers win, after we talked about how their roster's deficient and Danny's going to need a year or 2 to build that team up, and then he goes through the first cycle of the NFC West and beats all of them, and then he goes to Washington and beats Bailey when he's undefeated, look out. No more weak roster. None of that. All of a sudden, Danny's the guy in the NFC that becomes the favorite to hold up the trophy and go to the Super Bowl and represent the conference in the biggest game of the year. I can't wait to see what happens in that game. Another game I can't wait to see what happens in is another NFC game. It's between JD's Bucks and Reese's Cardinals. It's becoming very late in the season for JD here, only in week 6. Now, in all fairness, we don't know what's going to happen here in week 5 against Hitman. If JD wins that game, he'll pull to 2-3 on the season with a chance to get to 500 against Reese's Cardinals. But if he loses that game, he's at 1-4, and I think he's an underdog in this game against the Cardinals. 1-5 to me, even in a division that nobody is running away with yet, to me feels like a death sentence. And for JD's sake, he's losing games where I think he's at least aware of what he's doing wrong, but he needs to find a way to correct those mistakes and to get back to playing the game strategically that he's most comfortable with. And it's gonna be a tough, tall order this week in Arizona because passing lanes just aren't gonna be there against that secondary. They are too good. They have superstars at almost every single spot in the secondary, and that Cardinals defense is loaded. Offensively, Reese can be a headache. He can also make mistakes, which for a guy like JD, he is going to take advantage of your mistakes. This to me is a very intriguing matchup. I picked Reese to win it in my predictions. I feel like it's a flip of the coin game, and I can't wait to watch it. So guys, week 6 is here. We're 6 weeks in. To me, it is contender-pretender separation time. It's time to set yourself up for that second half run, find out who's going to make the playoffs, and who's going to be home for the holidays, getting ready for the draft, and making trades. It's a good league. I'm super happy with the activity level we've had so far. There was an issue this morning with the servers going down, and then again tonight there was server maintenance. I don't know if it's hurricane related with EA being based out of Florida, but we may have to be a little flexible with our advance time tomorrow due to the fact that people couldn't play this morning and they couldn't play for a little bit tonight. So we'll see what happens there, but right now we're on track to advance at 11 p.m. on Friday night. Enjoy the games, good luck in week 6, and we'll see you next time on AFL Advance.